Greetings, everybody, for another supplemental episode. We're going to talk tonight about our thoughts and feelings of the first season of Picard, which, as you probably know, started airing in January of 2020 and then aired over the next few months. So tonight is me and Ryan, Captain Maddox again,
Hello.
our chief engineer, Travis Holden, and
Hello.
his partner, Keeley. Hi, Keeley.
Hiya.
Welcome.
Why, thank you.
How do we feel? Anybody want to jump in right away?
Well, are we sure, why not? Let's just go for it.
Ryan, did you take notes again? Because you brought notes for the Discovery.
I'm literally writing them down as we speak, because I was a little caught behind with life between last episode and this one. But I have watched all of Picard again between then and now. And it is... my feelings on it haven't changed much from the initial impression that I have after viewing it the first time. Now, I'll start off by saying I made a post on social media shortly after the first episode aired, and I still believe this in my heart of hearts, that this show started out with... it met all of my expectations, and my expectations were super high, and that was really unexpected for me. The first episode, 2, maybe even 3 episodes were like everything on, but in particular, the first episode was so good and didn't leave me wanting for more. It wanted me to figure out what was happening next. So it didn't have me as a fan going, "Oh, I wish they had done this." It was only
You
like...
bought in.
I was totally bought in. Yeah, it was in, and I made some post to the effect that this show has the greatest potential of any Star Trek show in my lifetime, or something to that effect. Maybe not quite that dramatic, but a couple days later...
dramatic? No,
not me.
About Star Trek? Absolutely not.
But a couple days later, I got a package in the mail that was a bottle of Chateau Picard and a Starfleet red wine as well from whatever it was. I forget what the winery was.
Did you ever figure out who that was? Because
yes,
you didn't
yes,
know.
I did, and they wished to remain anonymous. It took a long time, but eventually, the person said, "Okay, it was me. Please don't give me any accolades. I'm not wishing for it. It was just I could feel it." I
felt like the gift itself was enough, and I didn't want to draw too much attention.
Yeah, it was very kind of you, Brian. It really was. No, because this person felt the excitement that I had in that moment, and so my initial impressions were just aces for the first few episodes.
that
Travis,
transitions
Keeley?
perfectly
What,
into my impression of the show. And my lasting takeaway is that I want to live on a vineyard.
Yeah,
That's the biggest takeaway I have from that show.
that estate is gorgeous.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Yeah. Travis, what were your feelings, especially towards the beginning?
Yeah, I bought in too. I think it started so strong. I think we all have different opinions of how it ended and some of the stuff near the back end. But I'm right with Ryan. Like, I bought in.
Yeah.
Some of the stuff seemed a little like out there, but I was there for it. I was like, heck yeah, let's do it. I don't really care. Like,
can I ask what you meant by out there? Like what topics you're talking about?
Like where we see you out there.
I see what you did there. I see what you did out there.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry, Travis.
That's okay. It's just Brian. He's never going to change. So yeah, like the central mystery of it is just very, very leans hard on the idea of just this mystery MacGuffin, right? Like this, who is she and what's her story as the driving plot. It's very heavy-handed.
Sure.
I can't remember how early they went into it and stuff, but sort of the deep background of the Romulan super secret police, like not just the secret police, but
Yeah,
super
not the-
secret police.
Yeah.
And little things like that is just like, it's a little far, it's a little much, but I
Okay.
was fine with it. I was okay with the idea of like, okay, sure, why not? Like, it's Star Trek, and I'm not gonna beat it down for these little things, especially because you can do that with the previous shows pretty heartily at this point. So I was like, I'm okay with it. So
No, that's a good point.
I was
Yeah,
on board with the mystery, so
I
there
think
were.
it's the most emotionally bought in that I've ever been on a first episode of any
Yeah,
like, Star
I
Trek.
think it was a great, like, the first few episodes are a great setup. And I'm with Travis in the sense that, like, did it I they I think they fell into the trap of everything has got to be the absolute most turned to 11, right? So it can't just be a group of people who have this belief about AI. It has to be Romulan society and this huge old thing, and it can't just be a group of people. It's got to be the secret.
Yeah, they got a
Romulan
retcon that it's
really.
always been there. It's always been operating
Exactly.
in the background.
But yeah, overall, I think like it was a great setup. And I'm sure we'll get to the ending. But I actually realized I rewatched most of it today. Like I watched some of it over the course of the last few days, but half the season today. And I realized, so the one thing that was definitely starting to grate on my nerves towards the middle of the season was this like sense of drama that is just everybody being pissed at each other for whatever reason. Like Raffi is pissed at Picard and Rios is pissed at
also Picard.
Yeah. And you know, just all like that's drama, right? Like that is dramatic writing, is everybody being mad all the time. So that was grating on my nerves, but rewatching it today, I realized that they didn't go that direction in the one place where it would have been the easiest to fall into that trap, and where I am so incredibly thankful that they did not, which is with Riker and Troy. There was nothing in the like, I can't believe you abandoned us or whatever. Like none of that style of angst drama in that relationship. Which
I mean, that's the
well, if you remember All Good Things, like the future part of All Good Things, they fall into that trap between Riker and Worf. So I was a lot more appreciative of that choice this time around.
Well, also like the Riker Troy thing, like they leaned into the fan service on that episode, right? Like it was just
there's stuff
the fans wanted a happily ever after for Riker and Troy, so they wrote in a happily ever after for Riker and Troy. They still added the drama of lost the child so that it would fit in with the storyline. But that episode is pretty leaning of just like, these are the characters you love and we're going to show them happy and having a relationship with each other. And like, I kind of wish they had just done that more in the series as a whole. Because
so you think that's a good thing?
Yeah, I thought it was a great thing.
Me too. I thought you were leaning that it was.
I meant that's why I felt like it worked for a lot of fans in that way, is because it was like I don't necessarily mind adding drama. We can get into the larger debate of the idea of, one of my favorite things about TNG was the fact that there was no interpersonal drama on the show, because there was a rule in the writer's room that there couldn't be. It was supposed to be the future and everyone should get along and treat each other with respect. And so they had to constantly come up with ways to make dramatic tension.
Unless some asshole named Jericho shows up.
Right.
Jellicoe. I'm sorry, Jericho. Yeah, right.
But yeah, so like they had that. And then you flip to the opposite end of the spectrum, which is like Deep Space Nine, which didn't have that rule in place. And so you had friction constantly. And while I think in a real objective grading way, Deep Space Nine is considered a better show because of that more realistic drama, TNG feels loving and warm because they were just like, no, the people get along and respect each other and treat each other like well all the time. And
it's interesting.
That episode of Picard was very much like, they all did the right things, and that's fine. Like, people can do the right thing sometime, and it's okay that you didn't have to have them like bickering with each other for no reason just to create drama in it.
Yeah.
I don't think they had to do that for the entire series, but I think the series would have been stronger if they had allowed some of that sort of like mantra to come through sometimes.
If they had allowed that kind of dynamic, which was basically fan service, but allowed that dynamic to bleed into the new characters and the new relationships a little bit more.
I think the hang up people have is when we call it fan service, it seems either frivolous or without depth or without place, like an actual seated place like cheap, in a story. Cheap. Yeah. It has all those negative connotations, but they grounded it. They gave fans the happy ending that they were looking for, like something that they were emotionally connected to and invested in and wanted, but they did it in a grounded way. They did it in a way that made sense and was connected to the rest of the story, and didn't detract by how like maybe out of place it was because it was just fan service. I think that's when fan service really gets its bad rap.
No, they yeah, I completely agree with everybody. It's like that. I think the episode's Penthe, right? I believe.
Nepenthe. I think.
Nepenthe, yeah. But it was one of the episodes where I had tears in my eyes for a significant percentage of that episode. Now I'm an over emotional hack, as we all know, and so that's probably comes as no surprise. But it was good. It was so like the fan service that they leaned on was exactly what the show needed, and like the one in particular that I love, and it, I wish they hadn't had spoiled it in the trailer, but it was when Riker is sitting there making his pizza, like doing the batter or whatever in the kitchen. And his daughter is yelling at him. He's like, "Stop yelling!" It's like, it's so Riker. It's like that would exactly be Riker as a dad.
Yeah.
And then to see him turn, like I haven't seen this in the commentary or anything, but I doubt it's the case. But in my mind's eye, I see that was the first time that Riker saw. Oh, that Frakes saw Stewart on set. Like they surprised him, like he wasn't going to be there until later in the shoot, and then he shows up, and that's because it's so genuine. It's such a good, it's such a great moment. And the first thing he does is hug him and bring him in and just pat his back. And there's a couple of moments in the series where those moments ring so true. The other one that stuck with me the most was, and this one's almost could be arguably more powerful, was when Picard first boarded the Borg cube, and
he has a panic attack.
He has a panic attack, and he sees Hugh, who he has seen exactly twice in his whole life.
Yeah,
and they embrace like old best buds, and it was like because they share this common tragic past, and it's obvious to us the viewers, but to think about like the characters and how much separation there was between them running into each other, that connection would be real is dead on. It absolutely would be. It was so good.
And also in their world, in their universe, like we're talking in universes, right? So we're talking in terms of vast expanses of space that none of us can really comprehend. So you've met someone twice in your life, and like, that's a significant connection, because you could go you can go an entire lifetime without seeing the same person twice.
And those two places were thousands of light years away from each other.
Right.
Also, like, I think that was at some point we are going to turn to the negative, because I know Brian's waiting to speak.
No.
Particularly the relationship of Picard, Hugh, and Seven of Nine is just so amazing, because it's like the three people that we've lived with in some way, shape, or form that were Borg, that were de-assimilated, that found their humanity again. And the relationship of those three was so strong that I wish that they leaned on that more, instead of sort of shoehorning in the rest of the Borg story that they did. Because I think those three,
that dynamic of like these three people who have a shared trauma, right? Like three survivors of the Holocaust or something, like they have a common experience that nobody else will ever be able to fathom.
And they never really
trauma that nobody else will ever be able to, to understand to its fullest extent. I think I hadn't thought about that until you said it just now, but now that you say that, I wish that Seven of Nine, Picard, and Hugh had more kind of an interaction, and it was the dynamic of the three of them a little bit stronger of a force, because that would have been
they didn't explore
really
it
powerful.
No, they didn't explore it at all. And like, in fact, there was that one great scene at the end of Stardust City Rag, after, first of all, like watching that particular episode, which is when they go down and they're all in costumes, and Picard is really over the top with his character. I really didn't like it the first time. The second time watching it's so good. Like I buy in the second time. which is something significant because
I immediately thought of all the holodeck episodes where he just
Mhm.
leaned into the detective, and it was like, of course he's going to be just an utter
just
ham
over the
about
top.
it.
Yeah. After trying to teach Data the nuance of Shakespeare, he's going to go over the top with his gangster. Yeah. But at the end of that episode, when he and Seven have that brief moment in front of the transporter on the La Serena, where she asked him, "Did you ever reclaim your humanity?" And he says,
Yeah.
"Yes, all of it." And he pauses and says, "No." And like
No.
that is fucking great.
Yeah, it's
Like
so
that's
good.
Mhm.
it's so good. And everybody's like, they should have pushed it. I don't think that, I might be wrong, I might be misremembering, but I don't think that
The three of them.
Seven of Nine and Hugh ever interacted. Like Seven of Nine referred to Hugh when she joined the Borg cube, but he had already been killed.
I think
And
that's
she's
correct.
talking
Yeah.
to Elnor. It's like, where's Hugh? And he's already dead. Like they didn't even have the opportunity to have those two interact
I'm
at all,
trying to
which is
remember
such a
now.
shame. The fact that choice is let's talk bad. That choice to kill to kill off Hugh that quickly is just a wasted opportunity.
Well, just one last thing that I liked, or it uh, sparked an interest in me that I wouldn't have anticipated ahead of time. But seeing the relationship between Picard and Seven, and then okay, they've obviously had some kind of past interactions, adventures, whatever, which totally makes sense given both of their stories. I really want to see the adventures of Picard and Seven now, like
Yeah.
limited series something. I think would be awesome.
Or just them at BorgCon or something. Like cosplaying humans.
Something of them like rescuing XBs or setting up the refugee program or whatever. But I would love to see that relationship explored more.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, those three, and it ties into, I think, jumping into negative, because we're going to get there at some point. I'm going to try and pepper in positives because I still have several more as we go. But getting into some of the negative, the Borg thing, along with several other things in Picard, to me, that felt negative was just the combination of what you'd mentioned earlier, where they felt like they had to dial up to 11 on every single thing, coupled with this feeling that they had to just manufacture plot to get where they needed to go, as opposed to sort of letting the story drive and letting relationships drive. It was like, we want the Borg to be there because Borg are super cool, so we're going to include them somehow.
Yeah.
And they even got to that pretty solidly. I thought, again, the first several episodes, it was like, this is neat. This is an interesting idea. But it seems like they didn't really know exactly what they were supposed to do with it, other than the fact that they wanted them there. And so they just kind of kept pushing and doing whatever they could do to get it going. And so, yeah, instead of exploring the relationship between Hugh, Seven, and Picard, you got big fight scenes and like random Borg conduits and a little bit of here and there, but not a lot of actual meat to that bone.
Very disjointed. Beyond
that.
I
think it reminded me, because I had the same thought watching it today, and it reminded me of your comments about Discovery, Ryan, where it's like they're trying to cram too many things in, too many ideas, too many set pieces, too many elements. Like, okay, we got to put the Borg in there, and we've got to put Romulans in there, and we've got this and Android. And if they could have pared it down and been a little bit more, I'm gonna say streamlined, but just taught in terms of
disciplined in their direction.
Yeah.
I mean, because Picard was operating at an even greater disadvantage than Discovery, because Discovery had 13, 16, I can't remember how many, but Picard only has 10 episodes.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's like when I'm watching it and I watched it the second time, I actually got the feeling, and I wonder if this is at all true. Like I get the feeling like how I watch now the theatrical release of Lord of the Rings, where like the show just goes on and you're like, there's a lot missing between these scenes that I now know what happened, and it makes much less sense to me now knowing what I should have known when I watched it the first time. Yeah. Like it's almost like if they had an extended cut of Picard and you get to fill in all these gaps, all these relationships wouldn't feel so rushed and so cliched, trite. I don't know. It's like go ahead.
I was gonna say when I was watching it, because I watched it all when it was coming out live, and then I think I did a second watch through right afterwards, but I haven't watched it since then. But I definitely remember it's the second one through. I did the writer brain where I'm rewriting how I would do it if I was, in charge of the thing. And absolutely, I don't think there was a minute where I wasn't like, this needs at least like 2 or 3 more episodes to really have a chance to breathe in some of these segments.
I feel like Raffi got the short end of that stick.
Absolutely.
Maybe the most of all, because they were very clearly trying to do a thing of, okay, she's trying to overcome addiction. Her life fell apart because of her addiction at some point, and she's trying to put her life back together, and it destroyed her relationship with her son, yada yada. But like exactly what you're saying, Travis, that one scene where she has that conversation with her son and that's it. It's like you really need a lot more to unpack there, because when you just have that scene, it's really trite and cliche and just doesn't have the depth, because you don't have the time to put the depth that relationship actually deserves.
Yeah, it feels like you're trying to check off a character development box.
Also, that one's really weird because in one of the rare instances in the show, they actually have fallout from that. She has the conversation, and then for like a full episode and a half, she locks herself in her room and just drinks incessantly. So there's actual consequences to that. And it's like, it feels like you got more consequence of that conversation than any of the buildup or emotional impact of that actual conversation. And it's like, well, that's a shame, because you have the flip side of that where they have, one of the crew members murder someone and they just gloss right over that and immediately everyone's fine with it and forgets about it. So it's like, again, if they had a couple episodes, like 3 to 5 episodes, I'm building extra on here now. Because again, if you're trying to like really unpack all of these different things.
Well, think about how many, like the original series had 20 plus episodes. The original TNG series had
the original sequel
had 20 plus episodes in it, and you have so much opportunity in tiny, seemingly throwaway moments in random episodes for huge character development seeds to be planted.
And the ability to center episodes around a particular character, and like we're going to learn all about Riker this week, and then we're going to learn all about Troy, and etc.
A Worf episode.
So with this, with this kind of format, especially with such the huge epicness storyline to it, you're trying to like, okay, let's look at Raffi now. Okay, that was good. Now let's look at Rios, and you're just shifting.
And the reason why it doesn't work in those instances, whereas in some episodes with character moments it does, is because the episodes where it works, we already know the characters. In Penthe, we know those characters. They're already fleshed out. We know the deep intricacies of all of their complicated relationships, and they're trying to do the same thing in 10 episodes with these characters that we've literally just met, and they're just paper thin at that point, and it feels very, very forced. But I want to talk real quickly about that. There's the one problem I have with Penthe is when the moment where Troy and Soji are having a conversation in the garden, and Troy is doing her counselor thing, and it's beautiful, and like she's explaining to Soji, or she's trying to get Soji to talk, and she's I can't remember exactly how it was directed, but it's such a good character moment. And for both of them, for both Soji and Troy, and it's like it's pulling on those old feelings of Troy in her quarters giving counsel to someone, and it's so true and so pure. And then they like, in comes Picard trying to use what I think is reverse psychology, and he yells at Soji saying, "Yeah, this is all a simulator. You should hate us," or blah blah blah. Yeah. And it felt so coarse and forced, and not in Picard's character. It was the only time in the show where I questioned, like, that is not a choice that the character I know would have done. Like, that seems so out of place. And then the resulting discontent that Troy releases upon Picard then kind of felt forced, because everything was so perfect before then. Then like the shakedown, the talk down that she gave to Picard, rightfully so. I mean, it was a terrible thing he did in that moment, but it just felt it was the only thing that felt wrong in that whole episode to me.
I feel like they were trying to make him like older and a little bit cantankerous, like similar with the interview. Like I think they were trying to show a bit of Picard's character progression and
Sure.
like how in this part of his life and his age, because of everything that's happened, this is how he's changed. But I agree that that was a little bit.
Yeah, you know,
I think it. I think it was actually even more intentional than that. I think what they were trying to do in moments like that, and I agree that it didn't work, but what they're trying to do is say he's got this illness and it's progressing, and one of the symptoms is mood swings and that,
yeah.
and so those moments where he kind of loses it, like in the interview and at Sochi, are supposed to be him losing it, but it goes back to what we were talking about before in the sense that we don't spend enough time on it so that when one of those moments comes up, that's what it registers as. It just registers
absolutely.
as a fourth scene.
That's a really good point, because I didn't even think about the issue. But yeah, but to Keeley, your point, like the interview, I totally bought in on, because you could feel the temperature rising in the room when she was pressing him, especially when it was confirmed earlier by his Romulan hand folk that they weren't going to ask those questions. But immediately preceding the conversation in the garden, he and Riker were just, chatting and bullshitting and having a great old loving time. And then it felt really out of left field.
Again, it falls into your idea of like, there must have been a couple scenes in there somewhere that in the extended edition would have like been talking like, maybe I just need to shake her out of it, and then that scene,
like just that line would have helped. Yeah, exactly. But the one good thing about the end of that scene was Riker catching Picard after Soji knocks him over, and he just goes, "Hey!" Like that was spot on.
That was definitely Riker, 100%.
Yeah, protecting his old man. Yeah.
Speaking of the Romulan like flatmates that Picard had, did either of you read the prequel comic?
Yes.
No.
I read yours actually, Travis.
Well, that's right. I let you borrow it. Okay.
Yeah.
Because it tells the story of basically how they came to know Picard, which I think was good. Like
it was.
Like it was fairly simplistic. They went to a planet and the Romulan governess was being basically a jerk and super Romulan about everything. And and finally they're like, okay, they turned on essentially their bosses to help save the local
there was like an enslaved local species
or another race or something, and so they were like, no, the planet is dying, or there's something going on and we have to help save them. And so because of that, they were going to be basically banished from the Tal Shiar, and so they went with Picard. And I felt like that made the rewatch, because I didn't read them before the show aired. I got the comics a couple, like halfway through the season or something. When I reread them, when I watched them the second time, I was like, oh, that's cool. It actually gave a little bit more context. It didn't add a ton, but it was a little bit. And I was like, okay, cool. That's nice. But again, it's something that would have been interesting as like in an extended edition to have some additional
and especially with those two characters, because we spend a lot of time with them in the first couple of episodes,
and then
they're gone. So we spent a lot of time like getting to know those people and understanding their relationship with Picard and starting to feel empathy and everything with them.
Yeah.
And then we move to the ship and Rios and
keep it moving. Keep the plot moving forward.
It's like time was just really poorly allocated. So like you could have cut some of that relationship. If you're not going to have the payoff of that relationship, the like build and grow and get the depth that the rest of the show inherently has from the history and legacy of it, then use some of that time, don't develop those as much, and spend more time on Raffi backstory, spend more time on Rios. It seemed to me like the meeting of the legacy of these characters was really difficult for the writers to like match their depth with these new introductions, even to the characters as this. So like we've got Raffi, who their one defining big note of this character is addiction, right? Their struggle with addiction, and like the one big defining Rios character element. And then even with the characters that we see, like with Picard, his big defining additional element that they brought is like the illness and how that's impacting him. It's like they really pick one note and we're trying to hammer that note for these people, as opposed to the subtlety and depth and fleshing out to try to meet with all these legacy characters.
You know, it's almost like they were trying too hard with the crew, and they weren't trying so hard with the Romulan helpers that he has at Chateau Picard. And as such, they feel more natural, they feel more real, they feel more connected. And it's
Also,
like
we got more time with them.
yeah, well, and that's the other thing. It's like the one way that they were trying, in my mind, talking about hammering something home. Like, I don't know how many times the word crew was said on Star Trek Picard, but I feel like that's the only way that we are supposed to be aware that this team feels
This
like a
motley
crew, is
Yeah.
because they keep saying, "Oh, remember my crew." Agnes says when she's giving her she's confessing, "Oh, you know, this is the closest thing I've ever had to a crew." And on Penth, you know, Picard says, "I even had myself a crew." And Rio says, "You know, I had a crew." It's just like, guys, we get it. They're supposed to be a crew, but like, don't
Yeah.
tell me they're a crew. Show me they're a crew.
Yeah, they hadn't written that yet.
Yeah.
So.
Look, do you feel nostalgia yet? Because we've said crew a lot, so you know, nostalgia.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I still constantly default to the more, because again, I watched it the second time after I think we finished it, but I haven't watched it since then. And almost I distinctly remember the back half of that season is when it felt like it started going off the rails, because things started happening really quick and jumping a lot around and felt very disjointed. But I can't get over just how poorly the show handled I can't even remember her name right now. Her killing the doctor.
Maddox.
Oh,
Yeah,
Agnes killing Maddox.
Agnes and Maddox.
Killing Maddox, and just like they like that scene was fascinating, and her trying to deal with that was interesting. For a half
And
episode,
Alison Pill's performance is incredible. Like
Yeah.
this like I thought it was good the first time around, but this time rewatching it, I was really like,
yeah, it's tremendous.
it's great. It's a great performance.
Mm-hmm.
And that concept is really good. And then literally she just emits it, and then by the next episode, it's never mentioned. There's no fall. Again, we have fallout from Raffi and her son for like an episode and a half.
Yeah.
But then her literally murdering Maddox, who's their big clue to get to this next thing, is just like, oh, that's really dramatic. After commercial, everyone's fine.
Well, you know, to the defense of the show, it wasn't quite that quick, having just watched it. First of all, after she regains consciousness after taking the pill to wipe out the tracker, and sitting next to her in her bed was Picard giving the dad stare to her. That was like, that was awesome. Like, it was like, here's the man who has.
I'm not mad. I'm disappointed.
But here's a man who we all know.
Oh, come on, everybody knows that's worse.
for seven seasons and 3-4 movies, whatever it was the epitome of moral power.
Yeah,
and that look coming from that man was just devastating to me as a viewer.
Yeah.
It was awesome. And then they did touch on it for a little while, because they did say that they were going, once they went to, I don't know what, I think it was Deep Space 12, they were going to turn her in and deal with it. And that was like an episode or two later. They were going to turn her in, and then she was going to go to prison and yada yada, and she accepted her fate and yada yada. And then they decided not to do that. And then that's literally how they deal with it. Agnes is like, "Are we still going to Deep Space 12? Am I still getting arrested?" And then that's the end of that whole conflict completely.
yeah. I was like, that I don't know if that counts when you just go like, they just decided not to do that afterwards. Like, I don't know if
right.
Retroactively, that makes me feel like those decisions didn't matter anyway. So
Of course, yeah.
it's not really like, it's not actual fallout. The dad stare is basically the extent of the fallout for her murdering someone. That
Murdering the MacGuffin of the show up to that point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also,
that's
like, even if you want to just logically follow, if she had not done that, they would have been much better off for the rest of the show, right? Like, that was a huge like setback.
he was the father of the entire planet of synths. Yeah.
So the idea of like not just fallout in terms of like emotionally she betrayed the crew, she also was a murderer, but also it hurt their specific quest that they were on. And they're like, well, we'll turn you in. And then an episode later, they're like, maybe not. It's fine.
And like I feel like Alison Pill is, we've already covered this. She's a fantastic actor, and
Heck of a drummer.
is is convincing in she's putting everything she can into this character. She's owning this character for what's on the page. That's all an actor can ever do, right? But I feel like we've talked about how Raffi got the short end of the stick. I actually think it's Agnes that gets the short end of the stick, because she's supposed to be the turntable. She's supposed to be the big plot twist. But the big plot twist happens, like we just talked about, in episode 4 of 10, and it's like, what? Okay, and then the romance that she and Rios have was so forced. It was like all they had to do, in my opinion, was take out the sex that happened in, I think, episode 5 or 6, whatever it was, where it's like the first time that you actually see Agnes and Rios by themselves is like, I've never slept with a starship captain. Well, I recommend it. And then they do. And then
the episode is aptly named Impossible Box.
Touche.
Just for the listeners at home.
But it's like, it happened so quick and so unbelievably that, like, I didn't buy into any actual romantic connection there. And at the end of the show, I think the last time we see the two characters, they're kissing on the bridge. And it's like, if they had just taken out that sex scene and they just had like the tension, and then they walked away and like just did the rest of the show, and then that end kiss would have so much payoff. But it's like, that kiss means nothing. They've already
I was actually going the other way rewatching it today, in the sense that
they should have cut everything out but the sex.
That's exactly.
The whole show.
No, in the sense that, like, when she first kisses him, like, she's just in a totally, like, she's on tilt as a person, completely just
she's
out of her, like, what,
the hole of guilt and pain that she has.
Yeah. So, that makes sense in terms of, okay, I have no idea what's going on. This will feel good. Yeah. Jump at it. And then it seemed like what they were doing afterwards is like, oh, that was just
a mistake.
I was having a bad day that day. So thanks for making it a little bit better, but that was just that. And then when the kiss at the end happens, you're trying to sell it like an actual romance is where
that's actually the way, because they even say it when she kisses him, right? Like they have that quick conversation where she's like, this is probably a mistake and I shouldn't do this, and he's like, yeah, but also how about okay, sure, whatever. And if
she has a line, something like,
she says,
my superpower is knowing I'm making a mistake while I'm making it, or something like that.
Yeah. I actually thought that, like, when that scene happened, I was like, okay, I get what's going on here. And then when they treat it as a mistake afterwards, that makes perfect sense. Like, that's two human characters that are consciously making not necessarily the best decisions, but the decisions that feel good in the moment. And like that, I thought was really solid.
Yeah.
And when they tried to make them romantically involved, it was like, no, they both knew that this was a bad idea, and they would both basically just kind of be like, okay, that was, let's just move past that.
Yeah.
But I felt like the writers felt like they had sex, so now they need to be in a relationship. Otherwise, CBS is going to be mad at us because we can't have a woman just like want to have a sexual connection for a minute and then be like, never mind, because that would be too bad. So.
While we are talking about sexual relationships, can we talk about Narek and his sister and how fucking weird that shit is?
Oh, that's so weird.
What was that?
I
don't
understand the purpose of that. So like, we watched Game of Thrones, right? We get when that kind of plot device is utilized for a purpose, right? It's supposed to evoke gross, you're supposed to have certain emotions that the writers are going for, right? And like, we already kind of have that with Romulans. Are you just trying to make us go really, really ooh at Romulans? Or like, is that the whole point of it? Because I don't understand that beyond that.
Well, so made no sense. A thought occurred to me rewatching it today, in the sense that, like, because they have that, brother sister line at some point, but it occurred to me today that might not be literal, or the writer's intention might not have.
No, it was absolutely literal, because later on in the show, he confesses, is like, I did this. The reject of the family, the Tashiar dropout, or whatever, the Zhat Vash dropout. I'm the one who
did. That's okay. So what I took away, so maybe I misunderstood, but what I took away was that, like, they were brothers and sisters in the coven of the Zhat Vash. In that sense, so like in the circle when the Romulan agents, sees the vision and all the other women see the vision and they go crazy. Like I expected, or I would have inferred that they would have all referred to each other as sisters. And if Narek was part of that same...
but she referred to the one Romulan in the same circle as Auntie.
But that was her proper name, I thought.
No, that was her aunt.
Oh. All right.
Yeah,
that's the way I took it.
You might well be right.
If there were some really intricately subtle ideas that they were like brother sister in camaraderie as opposed to actual brother sister, I missed it in 2 viewings, and
it didn't even occur to me.
Say that you didn't do a very good job of making that clear in 2 viewings that I missed it.
Maybe that's just kind of what I've manufactured because it made it feel better for me.
Less creepy.
Because I find that actress incredibly attractive, so I wanted to just minimize that feeling.
She was.
Even if you want to make that a thing, make it a thing for a reason, but there was no seeming reason to have it there. It was just like,
if it's just to elicit the like disgust feeling from the audience, there's other ways to accomplish what you're trying to accomplish with that.
Even that, it didn't feel like they were shooting it to elicit a disgust feeling. It was just this like weird sexual tension thing that they were sticking on screen for some reason. It was like, what?
I don't know.
Yeah. Early on, like one of the earlier scenes of it reminded me of one of the early scenes of Enterprise, which I started watching Enterprise and then stopped watching it because I was like, this is the dumbest thing I've ever seen.
Oh, you should get through it. It's better.
No, I ended up watching the whole thing.
Okay.
But it was one, I remember discussing it with Brian like years ago, but there's like a decontamination sequence where it's just a bunch of
with
random close-ups of what's her name?
Jolene Blaylock. Yeah. It's just like Jolene Blaylock is the hottest thing we've ever put on screen. Let's rub her down with gel.
Yeah,
no, and I remember
tons of close-ups.
I remember that like being a discussion or a controversy at the time, like before the episode aired, because that's the pilot. It's the first episode of the show, and it would have been so much better if it was that Scott it was Bakula. Like, Star Trek is getting PG-13 and risque, and it's like, should it be that, or is this betraying what Star Trek? Really, it was bad because it was gratuitous and served no function. And then through the rest of the series, they never like use the decontamination gel or whatever the hell it is.
I'm telling you, it should have been Trip and Scott Bakula doing that back in 2005. That would have been awesome.
Honestly, that would have been better. Like I would have at least been like, at least you're like turning a trope on its head and leaning into
right.
it.
Yeah.
But that's like the sexual tension between those 2 characters, particularly because they don't mention that they're brother and sister until like they've done 1 or 2 scenes like that. It felt like before they actually referred. And so it's like, you're just creating this like weird sexual tension and then later being like brother and sister, weird. It's like, why are you doing this? Like, why can't they just be a brother and sister? Like, it felt like maybe they were leaning into this idea of they were like circling each other, sort of like wolves circling each other in some way. But they didn't know how to do it properly, so they were just like, let's just make it sexual tension.
Well, and they also like added that as a element of suspicion, like additional suspicion for her to him. Like there was an element of like jealousy for his relationship with Soji or whatever.
Yeah, totally there was. Yeah.
And gross. So why though?
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, she was absolutely jealous because she mentioned so many times, like, did you fuck her? Did you like? And she said, I think she asked that specifically when she meets him on the synth planet. Before then, she's like, you smell like her, like carnally or whatever she says, like, and it's like, fucking stop. This is just weird.
They're the bad. We know they're the bad guys.
Yeah,
like we get it.
And again, to reference, like Keeley mentioned, Game of Thrones, it exists in that world. And so, like, okay, but we at least see in Game of Thrones the context of that. Like, we can talk all day about Game of Thrones and why all of that stuff didn't work properly.
Well, right.
But conceptually, at least, you understand why it's a big deal and that it happens. And, like, you see the context of it within the world. This one, it felt so isolated. Like it's just this random incest plot that it's like, what?
Incest is if you're going to write a story, that's a choice. It's a really specific choice, and you got to know how it's going to impact your audience and how it's going to impact your story. And to make that choice, just like, this could be interesting as an element, it's like that doesn't follow. You can't, like, you are making too much of a decision, and it's going to impact it in way too many weird ways if it's not intentional.
100%.
In Game of Thrones, it's critical to the plot. Like,
not only is it critical to the
plot,
but it also becomes sympathetic. Like, you get to the point with Cersei and her brother in Game of Thrones. We won't talk much about this, but like, you get it, and like you actually know that there's that is actually as twisted as it is by moral standards today. That's a love story. But that aside, Keeley, your point is
it's a trauma love story.
But your point is so well taken about like, oh, this is interesting because how many fucking times did they do that on this show? How many times did they tease us with an amazing idea with zero payoff? 7 becoming
the 23 episode.
The 7 becoming the Borg queen of one cube is an idea. Tara's here. Is an idea that is just
a teal wearing a teal dress.
Wonder why your name's that.
Yeah, Teal's here.
Yeah,
but like like that was one of those things where I was like, oh my god, that's a game changer. Like, she's not going to be Borg queen because that cube has been disconnected, but she's going to be queen. Yeah, how interesting is that going to be? Gone, done.
Yeah,
and then they go through the transwarp conduit, and it goes first the La Sirena, and then Narek and his ship, and you're like, oh my god, Narek is chasing the La Sirena. How are they going to get out of this? Boom! Enter a Borg cube out of the transwarp conduit, and you're like, oh my god! And then flowers.
That was awesome.
Yep. Then flowers.
Well, hold on. We're gonna dunk all over the synth world in a second, I'm sure.
Okay. Yeah.
But I will again note that when it comes to like the Borg queen, as well as like the random incest plot and a lot of other things, the 23 episode season of Picard is amazing. It would just be phenomenal.
Right?
Too bad we only got 10 of those episodes.
Yeah. The Peter Jackson cut of Picard is
episode 1 or season 1.5, the second half of season 1.
But then they're gonna split it up, and they're gonna you're gonna have to still pay like for a full season for half a season's worth of the DVD box set.
They did that for
Battlestar did that. That was just so cheap.
I'm not gonna lie, they did that for Eureka. You have to buy like DVD copies of season 4 and 4.5 for Eureka, and Eureka is not a show that really deserves broken seasons. Like I like Eureka, but come on. So Space Flowers. Discuss.
I mean, I think that's the quintessential example of really cool idea, do nothing with it beyond the one scene that it's in, and you're left because it is a cool idea, but it's so left field. And
is it a cool idea?
wait,
I think it could be. I think you're absolutely right. It could be a very cool idea if they didn't go like so flower child with it. Like, it could be cool if you're like actually from what about botanist weaponry, like But no, this is very hippie peace love.
Do you guys? I guess it makes sense. It never even occurred to me that those were living creatures. Those are living plants. Like those were alive. Yeah. It never even occurred to me. It just seemed like stupid attack designs. I don't know.
So I read it as the idea of them using a living thing because they again were trying to live in sort of this harmonious way, which they never followed through on in any way, shape, or form. They did the space killer flowers, and that was essentially the only aspect of their society other than the fact that they lived in a commune, that they were sort of peace-loving hippie people. Mm-hmm. And then
which was a very season 1 season 1 TNG Planet of the Week setup.
Yeah, pretty much. And it would have been interesting if they had expanded on the idea, like maybe they had built an entire civilization that was very in concert with nature in a way that would have been interesting, that would have been really cool. these
Yeah.
artificial beings living with nature in a way that like humankind has never actually fostered. Would be fun.
I love that idea.
That's a
I
great
love
idea.
the idea that synthetic life forms revere natural life so much and are fascinated by it in ways that humans wouldn't be or humanoids wouldn't be,
Yeah.
and that they utilize it in ways that humanoids wouldn't utilize because they have this unique perspective on life itself. I love that idea. Did we get any of that?
Yeah, and then literally 2 episodes later, they decide they want to join up and join an AI that will destroy all sentient life.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah. And like sorry,
They
but
go from a hippie commune to we are going to join an AI that's going to destroy all living biological life.
and there's thematic potential in there in the fact that like, okay, if you go down that route of these androids have mastered biological life and creating entire ecosystems and everything, well, that basically means that they're God, right? Like they
That'd be awesome.
have not only ascended past being robots into humans, they've gone beyond being humans and are now God. And maybe that's what the humans find so incredibly threatening, right? And so we have to kill God or God is going to kill us. And the androids are like, well, we're just better at this than you are, quite frankly, so we're going to keep doing it. Like,
Yeah,
When really the God that was going to kill us all was always going to be social media.
I mean,
Yeah.
also though, I'm late to this party because I was putting a toddler to
She's
bed.
putting life to sleep.
Admittedly, we've been way more positive for the first hour anyway.
But I wanted to say that I was like, holy shit, the Borg, a Borg queen is gonna happen, and it's gonna be 7 of 9, so maybe she could do something cool about that. And then and then flowers
And then not.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, never mind. But I was so bummed because it was such a like we were taught watching TNG that the Borg is a holy shit thing.
Yeah.
The Borg is a like.
Just don't watch Voyager. And yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
I
She
have.
said TNG.
I haven't.
I
said
know.
TNG. But like, remember in the first and second Terminators when the serious part of that was that the Terminator couldn't get near him, right? Like
Yeah.
it didn't have to be built up into like he's gonna throw him through a building and it's horrible. It's like, don't let him effing touch you because it's over. And that's what the Borg was. It was like, oh my god,
Don't let them touch you.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think there was
Exactly.
a line sort of to that effect in one of the movies.
Right.
Not sure.
So
And honestly, what's crazy, like while we're discussing this right now, Keeley's description of the idea of like purely synthetic life mastering regular life and creating this utopia of life and artificial life
yeah.
coming to a head with the Borg showing up, who are essentially sort of the same thing, but of a completely different perspective.
Yeah,
It's
they're
the
like-
shadow
it's like
side. It's the shadow and light
They
side.
would have
Nice
like,
side, yeah.
that concept actually would have been kind of amazing of the idea of like they can't do it because obviously the Borg were not set up in that way. But the
Right.
idea of the Borg being a pure synthesis of biology and technology against sort of this synthetic world that had mastered biology
Yeah.
would have been really fascinating.
That's really cool.
So go with me on this. So the Borg for me.
We've had whiskey.
Welcome. So the Borg for me is like what human beings' worst fear of their most basal instincts translated into artificial life is. Whereas the synths on that planet and Data, that is the most idealized potential
Yeah.
that synthetic life form can be.
Does
And
like
when
the
you-
Borg.
The Borg are the
and then when you
human
pit
id
them
and
against each other, how do those ideologies and how do those like core fundamental beliefs collide, interact? How do they mesh up, right? Like everything's a spectrum. Even you're talking about political spectrum, right? You go so far right, you come right back around left.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it's such a cool thing to explore.
I'm so glad
Wouldn't
they
it
did.
be cool if they had explored it?
They did that in episode 18 and a half.
all right.
No,
18 and a half.
that was episode 18 and 19. It was a two-parter. Um,
We say that the synths mastered biology, except Apparently,
Well,
They didn't.
No, they
Like-
didn't. But we're
hold
talking.
on.
We're going riffing off this idea.
Hold on a second. I'm getting there.
Okay.
So but all you have to do is apparently stab them
In the eye.
in the eye with a brooch, and that's it. That's the
Yeah.
end.
Yeah.
And that was another thing that really bothered me on this, going back to the Terminator comparison, because I thought about that exact aspect when they start punching out all of the androids to try to blow up the thing before it can do the thing.
Yeah. Elnor's
And like he like does the elbow thing to the one standing behind him, and he goes down. And
There's a lot of things in your description.
it's like we've seen Data fuck up way more harshly
They
than
had to take
that.
over the Enterprise half a dozen times.
Yeah.
Effortlessly.
Yeah, he went Vader on a Borg drone and beat a
Yeah.
Klingon in an arm wrestling contest like it was nothing. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, it was very much a if you've ever heard the term conservation of ninjutsu, which is the idea that like
No, but I love it already.
Yeah.
when the hero is fighting one ninja, that ninja is like super dangerous and
Yeah.
super skilled, and the tension and the stakes are so high. But if there's 100 ninjas, then he's
He
just going to
destroys them
walk
all.
through them like water, right? So it's the same amount of ninjutsu just spread out over more ninjas.
Oh, that's brilliant.
I'm really into it.
Amazing.
Yeah.
It makes Ninja Turtles make so much more sense.
Yeah,
every Lafoot
Yeah.
battle I've ever seen just
Because you
makes
never,
sense.
yeah, you never saw them fighting a foot. You always see
Yeah.
them fighting feet.
Yeah,
And
right.
the time they fight a foot is when they fight Shredder and they get their ass
Every-
kicked.
I
There
want
you
them
go.
to always refer to them as Lafoot.
I don't know why I made it French. I don't know why I did that.
So yeah, like I think again, so I have the wiki pulled up of the episode descriptions. Like season 1, it just gives like the paragraph for each episode. And I scanned through it, and again, the first several episodes of Picard are so good.
Mhm.
And then the back half, particularly the back third, I think, is when it just
Fell off the rails.
Ugh.
again they ramp it up to 11, and they just have to get through so much that it's just
I felt like it was like everybody at the table had an idea. Oh, let's put this in. Let's put this in. Oh, let's also put this in. Don't forget this.
Did somebody say flowers?
Right, yeah. And like, they just jotted down all the things, and then they were like,
that was the lunch guy dropping off lunch.
then like, okay, and now put it in the salad spinner.
I saw some flowers outside.
Yeah. Oh, flowers. That'll be it.
No, somebody had sunflower seeds.
Yeah. Oh, flowers. They can kill the Borg.
So like I always felt that it needed a few more episodes, but I think in this discussion, particularly the idea of it needing just a whole lot more room to breathe is just goes to your point, Tara.
Well, yeah. Well, so, since we've moved towards
let's let Tara finish.
the back end, why don't we get to the ending, the very ending of the season, and our thoughts on that.
Ryan, pause. Tara, go.
It's okay.
I cut off.
Wait, what happened? I missed whatever happened.
I cut off Tara, and Keeley was mad at me.
Oh.
What a dramatic reading this has been by Travis.
It's fine.
So, well, does anybody want to jump in about the very ending? I definitely have my thoughts. But so, and Ryan and I have talked about this before, but the idea, first of all, that there need to be 200 plus warbirds and then 200 plus Federation starships.
No.
Oh, by the way, Riker pronounces Jung-ha wrong, so that's annoying. But
Great.
Nerd.
yeah, so like
Ryan,
you could have had just
200 plus
exactly
more
the
ship.
same amount of tense and stakes with one ship versus one ship, or 3 versus 3. And again, it's that dialing up to 11 thing of it's got to be 200 versus 300.
Yeah. That
And
was yeah.
yeah,
It
and then
waters it
the
down.
actual ending itself of the okay, we're gonna kill Picard. No, we're not. Never mind.
Yeah.
And
just-
like it bothered me the first time around. It bothered me more this time around because I noticed how long they spend on everybody's grief over it. Like everybody breaking down, everybody dealing with it, and
yeah.
and which are all great scenes and would be great if they didn't just completely undo it right after that.
If they had gone for it and done a 1 season, of
killed Picard.
and that been the end of Picard, it would have been beautiful, and I would have forgiven a lot of other things because of how beautiful those moments were at the end of everybody dealing with it.
Yes.
And preparing for it and it happening, and then just kidding.
Those moments were worthy of a goodbye to a beloved character. They were.
Yeah.
But the rest of the show was not worthy of a goodbye for Jean-Luc Picard.
No, but
it was
some parts were very cool.
No. I'm getting there. So
wait, have you guys just been trashing it for an hour?
No. We really
No,
haven't.
we've actually been pretty positive.
Yeah.
Okay.
We only started trashing a little before you got here.
Yeah.
Okay, I was like, but there are good things.
It is. I will go to my graves believing that the final scene between Data and Picard is the finest Star Trek has ever offered. I think it is beautiful. It is poignant. It is social commentary on assisted suicide.
I love that scene.
It's a good scene. I don't know if it's the best scene, but
hey, I said I will go to my grave. I didn't say I will go to my grave and take Brian with me.
Actually, you said.
Well, speaking of which, you guys are all of my dear friends, so I'm just going to put this out there now. If you ever have the option, or there's the question of putting me into a robot body that could live forever, but you turn off the live forever switch, check with me before you turn off the immortality. That's the kind of thing you want to check with the person before you set that setting.
But one of the reasons why I think that it is so well done is because it does not just it makes Nemesis slightly better as a movie than it exists on its own, which is a hell of a feat.
Wow.
Which is miraculous.
Well, yeah, because it takes Blue Skies. It takes the song that Data sings, and then when he uploads his memory engrams into B4, that's what you hear B4 singing.
Yeah.
And then Picard looks at B4, and before Star Trek Picard, the last thing we see of the character Jean-Luc Picard is him singing "Never Saw the Sun Shining So Bright," and then he walks down the corridor, and then we cut to credits and yada yada, and it feels flat. And then the Star Trek Picard opens with Blue Sky playing, and I got chills the moment I heard it. And then you see the Enterprise D swoop in, and you see Data and you see Picard, but it wasn't forced. It wasn't like, oh, Data's back. It was obviously a dream sequence.
It was well done.
Lovely, and it was so beautiful. And then to come full circle at the end of the show and wrap it up and basically saying, with Data pleading to his best friend, who by almost impossible odds is now sitting face to face with him, and saying, "Do me this favor and let me die." Like, give me the one thing that I wish, which is I wish to have the expectation of death, because to live forever is torturous, and that's what Data asks Picard to do for him. And when he's holding his hand and I know I'm getting there. Picard is in his next gen uniform, and Blue Skies is playing, and it's a different rendition of Blue Skies. I don't know who the singer is, but she's fucking beautiful, and it's just wonderful. That's why it's I will go to my grave saying it's some of the best Star Trek ever.
So yeah, I agree, and I think that would have been an amazing way to end, to have Picard do that for Data and then also pass on would have been super fantastic. It's also tricky for me emotionally because I love Picard as a character. He's my favorite captain.
Same.
And it makes me think of another. This is one of the points I wanted to bring up earlier. It makes me think of another character that I think is amazing that will connect with Ryan a little bit, and that's Rocky Balboa.
Yeah.
Because anybody who's listening, Rocky Balboa was supposed to die.
Yeah.
I think it's at the end of Rocky 4 or at the end of Rocky 5.
Rocky 5. It was supposed to be Rocky 5, which is why Rocky 5 is terrible now.
Right. It's bad. But conceptually, the idea was that Rocky was going to go that one step too far ended up dying due to his injuries from boxing. And when you watch all of the Rockies, they're amazing. And the idea that they would end with him following the same fate as Apollo Creed is just
Beautiful.
Shakespearean.
Yeah.
And just amazing. And the idea of that is the way the character would end would make that entire film series create a whole new context and really amazing. I'm really glad they didn't, because the Creed movies are also awesome.
They
And
are.
I love the character of Rocky, and I'm glad that they didn't kill him.
Wait, is Rocky an android?
No, Rocky's not.
And
You
I
don't
mean,
know.
yeah,
You don't
in
know.
fairness, I don't know.
No.
Conceptually, like,
the
that
thing
was
is,
an
like,
idea that
nobody's
they
saying that
had.
you couldn't search for Spock Picard too, right? Just
Right, like,
season 2, just wait until season 2 before you search for Spockum. Like,
Well, I mean, how are you gonna do Star Trek Picard season 2 with
When
with
he's
Picard
when
dead?
Picard's dead,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, it wouldn't be much of a
Gotta give that
payoff.
away
come
with
on,
the
it's Star
season-
Trek.
Yeah,
There's
that's
a
fair.
thousand ways.
You put in a question mark at the end. Picard?
Yeah, so like, I get the idea of that would have been a really fantastic way to kill him off. It would have been painful. I think if they had killed him off in that, they shouldn't have done this. They wouldn't do a season 2. Like, I would rather that just be a
Yeah, that would have been
end.
more impactful, and it would have been more impactful if Spock never came back from the dead in Star Trek 3. I'm just saying, like, if the suits really want a season 2 for, the quarterly report, you can search for Spock, and just don't do it within 5 minutes of killing him off.
I watched the documentary today, the making of Schitt's Creek, and
I'm
Schitt's-
so invested on where this is going.
yes. So first of all, Schitt's Creek, great show, hilarious show.
10 out of 10.
10 out of 10. They went into it with this 6-season arc, and despite the fact that it got wildly popular, they were like, no, we already wrote where these characters are going and when it's going to stop. And everybody has asked them, like, are you guys crazy? Like, it's so popular. We all want more of it. And that is the way to go out. Don't go out on a note that was just pulling strings because you wanted more episodes. Like, go out in a beautifully told story that, was maybe 1 season long, but it was a hell of a season.
Absolutely.
Like-
Same thing with Avatar: The Last Airbender.
Yeah.
Avatar: The Last Airbender had a specific arc, got wildly popular. They're like, no, we're going to. They did end up creating Korra, The Legend of Korra, but the Avatar: Last Airbender is one of the best told, in my estimation, best told
Agreed.
complete stories.
Argument here.
Like in cartoon /
In
anime
storytelling
history, storytelling history. It's so like technically perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, like,
Completely
again,
agree.
I don't want to lean too hard into the animation, but also Gravity Falls. Gravity Falls
yeah?
is like a two-season arc that the creator was like, this is a summer in these 2 children's lives. And they got to the end of the summer, ended that story, and said, nope, we're walking away.
That's
Even
it.
though they
Yeah.
absolutely could have gotten renewed, but
Right.
they didn't, because they
Right.
said, nope, that's the story.
This
I think
this
that's-
Picard could have been one beautifully told season.
Well, it could have been if it was, but it wasn't.
No, but I mean, because they're like, let's set up all this other crap, but it could have just been.
Yeah, if they had taken their time and they had
Right.
wrote the whole story arc, and for once, yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I think part of that is the sort of shift we've seen in television, which is much more serialized storytelling, right?
Oh,
Like-
absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
I
Like,
mean,
the idea of
basically,
TNG
people are
is an
trying to
episodic
replicate
thing, and then you
people
get
are still trying to
some-
replicate Lost and Breaking Bad and that kind of feeling and effect.
right.
Yes, yeah.
And so that, I think, is a crux that
Breaking Bad. Sorry.
Sorry?
Who's
Breaking
going?
Bad is another example of what you're just talking about, like Airbender and Gravity Falls, where they had the arc, and they actually didn't have the ending worked out at the beginning, but they at some point in the production went, okay, this is what the story would be. This is where the ending is, and this is where the ending has to be for what the story is, and
how
they
do we
did
get
that.
there?
And there could have been more seasons of Breaking Bad. I'm sure. What was it?
Insane.
FX? Was it an FX show? I'm sure FX would have loved more seasons of Breaking Bad, but
No, it was AMC, wasn't it?
AMC.
Yeah, it was
Yes,
AMC.
you're right. So
Yeah,
Well-
like conceptually, the shift to serialized storytelling has made, I feel like, designing that idea much tougher. Because if you don't know, again, like this is a really good contrast for Avatar: The Last Airbender versus Legend of Korra. Airbender knew the entire arc when they started, and you can, when you rewatch that after you've seen it once, you see that from episode 1 they knew exactly how it was going to end.
Quite literally, there are like little Easter eggs in episode 1 that are only finally explained and wrapped up through the last episode.
Yeah,
It's
it's
Oh
amazing.
yeah.
It's
That's
beautiful.
Versus
cool.
Korra, which they didn't know, they were just writing them as they went, which again, the shift in television, again, I'm comparing TNG because that's where Picard existed,
Yeah.
versus Picard now. Just that shift in storytelling design of television had changed so much. When you watch Korra, it's a totally different beast. They're trying to tell this like massive story, but also don't know if they're going to get a season 2. And so it creates this weird sort of friction that doesn't exist. And I feel like when you watch TNG and it's like you watch Picard as a character in TNG, it's so fundamentally different than Picard as a show,
Yeah.
Yeah.
because just the design philosophy of how you're writing that show is totally
But
different.
if we take season 1 of Star Trek Picard and we say, all right, you can, if I challenge everybody to write at least 2, if not 3, 2 seasons, we'll break it in half, 2 seasons of Star Trek Picard out of the first season, it could be so good.
Again, yeah.
And the cliffhanger
Yeah.
would be, for season 1 in this instance, would be 7 of 9 becoming the Borg Queen. That is
Yeah.
like the
Oh,
Yeah.
that would be
Oh,
perfect.
I was gonna say Maddox's death.
yeah,
would be
I
the
actually
first.
would have leaned that way too.
Oh,
Either, I mean,
okay,
either
well, that's
way.
Well, that's what I mean.
Nice.
There's so much there, but it was compressed to 10 episodes.
Yeah.
Right, right.
Not seasons. We're talking hours. We're talking 10
Yeah.
hours of television.
Yeah.
Like there is so much there that could have been done, or
Yeah.
that could have been done.
But
Fully
because they
agree,
didn't know if
fully
they were going
agree.
to get 2 seasons, they didn't know how many episodes. And like, yeah, it's so tough. And I lay a lot on the writing. Like we've talked a lot about the writing and the decisions and stuff. And I don't necessarily envy the writers who are put into a position of trying to
Sure.
figure out a way to make this stuff work. Because it's very much like, yeah, I'm sure the people who were there behind Rafi as a character and everyone involved in that were like, man, I would have loved to have spent an entire episode exploring the history of Rafi and Picard. Because we get what, like one single flashback of Rafi and Picard when they were crewmates technically.
Yeah.
And even that's after, right? Like that's after he resigns. We literally don't see them once as actual crewmates.
Right.
And I imagine the people writing the show were like, man, I would love to have explored that more.
Fun. Yeah.
But you
Maybe
have 10
the-
episodes and you got to tell this massive story that completes this whole arc.
The whole second season is going to be like, here's a bunch of shit we were going to explore in the first season. We didn't have time. Like,
Star
I
Trek
think you wouldn't have
season
seen
2,
any
or season
of
1.
the Synths in season 1.
What's that?
that?
You wouldn't have seen any of the like Synths in season 1. You would have been just them
agreed.
finding
Yeah.
Maddox and then her killing him would have been the season
That should
finale.
have
in my
been
mind.
Yeah.
that should have been the series finale, like the synth, that resolution.
I
Good
was really interested in what's her bucket.
Soji,
Yes, and
Daj and
the,
Soji.
the twin situation and like how they got separated, where she came from, what was
Or
going on.
Daj.
Like, yeah, I was like,
Yeah.
okay, tell me this story. Why can Picard help you? This is neat. Okay, where are we going? And then it was like an extra thing, and it was just so much that I stopped caring. It was like you had
I
me
don't-
for a minute, and now I don't care.
So I
And
was
we
super
like complete.
invested in Daj and Picard's relationship and budding
Yeah.
relationship and how that was going, especially because when we see in TNG with Picard and like his hesitancy towards children and his hesitancy
Right.
towards like father, like parental ship, whatever.
Being a father figure.
Being a father
Right.
figure, right? Like that was really cool and something we hadn't explored. And I
Yeah.
was still on board when she was gone because they did it in a very compelling way.
Yeah.
And I was into it. However, as we're talking about this now and saying, hey, what if we had actually given all of the really cool shit that they did breathing room
Yeah.
and like depth.
Yeah.
I would have loved to
Yeah.
see this really cool father-daughter, father-grandpa kind of like dynamic develop with Daj for like 4 episodes.
Totally.
Right?
That
And
would've
then
been-
like that would have made that whole thing
Then her
so,
dying would have been epic.
oh
Yeah.
It was already fun.
wrenching. And then you
Yeah.
find
Yeah.
Soji at that point and you're like like yeah.
Right.
And they also
Through the roof.
completely
You want to
like
dial
glossed
something
over-
to 11, that's how you dial it to 11.
Yeah. Totally. You give it time.
they also completely glossed over the aspect of Data succeeded at creating a daughter. Like again, that was a whole
Mhm.
episode and a very
Well-
memorable episode. And
But
Yeah.
you're talking about the
Love.
episode The Offspring. Yes.
yeah,
Right. Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
the Offspring is one of the best episodes of TNG, and it's a very
It's
memorable
amazing.
one because it's
Yeah.
so good. And like, okay, that was a huge failure, and it was heartbreaking in as much as Data can be heartbroken.
Yeah.
And so at some point between then and Picard, he tried again and succeeded. And like,
Wait,
that
didn't
by
or
itself
didn't
is a
Maddox
huge,
No,
do
this
it?
was Maddox that did it.
oh yeah, like, yes, but with the help of Data's memories in B4, is that what it is?
Yeah, I
Correct.
think it's
Yeah.
something like that.
He
But
takes
just the idea of like Data tried this at this point, failed, and it was heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And then at some point, Maddox, the guy who wanted to take him apart at one point, but then who he considered as a
A
friend.
friend.
Yeah, also an incredibly weird, complicated relationship to explore there.
Totally.
But-
not out of nowhere, because in Data's day he's writing to Bruce Maddox.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like they have Measure of a Man, where he's the bad guy essentially.
Straight
And
up.
then Data says, I endeavor to help you, like, as going forward. And then they reference it periodically, including in Data's day when he's writing a daily log to Bruce Maddox, which presumably he must have done every day of his life, maybe, because he's Data
Yeah.
and he's not gonna forget to do that. So
The idea of Maddox like mourning Data's death, and the idea of him trying to create this artificial life form from B4 and from Data's memories is also a really interesting, powerful emotional connection.
yeah.
Because again, like Maddox may have started as a Data's a machine and I want to take him apart and figure out how he works. The idea of him maybe like befriending Data and coming to think of him as a life form and thinking that he's continuing Data's work as creating this new life form out of Data. Again, there's a lot there that
You
could have
could
been
create
explored.
a whole show called Measure of a Man that follows Bruce Maddox doing all this.
Yeah. And instead we don't get any of that, and then Maddox shows up and dies. And it's like, okay.
If they have had the forethought of the Marvel universe,
I
man,
mean,
But they did.
honestly.
They did. The
Yeah.
Marvel universe existed.
All right, why don't we, before we wrap up, come back around to something, end on a good note, end on a positive note of some kind.
I think total
So-
we've been more positive than negative, actually.
Well,
I don't think so.
probably not.
All right.
No.
I think we're excited about the possibilities that
Yeah,
were
that's fair.
presented.
Yeah. I
And
think that's a
that could be a really cool positive note to end on, in that this show, even if it didn't deliver in the ways that we would have wanted or expected, or like 2020 hindsight is 2020, right? It did pose those really powerful, cool, thought-provoking questions, and it really added to our experience as a whole of the Trek universe with these legacy characters, like these legacy stories. I think it really impacted them in a cool new way.
Maybe they, in the finest tradition of both Star Trek and Star Wars, maybe they'll write a whole bunch of expanded universe books that dig into all of these ideas, and
And then ignore
those
them
books
later.
are incredible
pretend they
stories
don't
on their own.
Yeah,
What'd you say, Ryan?
I said, and then ignore them later on with a new franchise,
Oh, yeah.
new expansion of the franchise.
Then do that.
I'm-
Yeah.
The Celsius timeline.
I'm not sure if you guys mentioned it earlier, but one of my favorite parts through all of this was seeing Picard and Riker and Troy.
We could-
Yeah. Well, we gushed about that.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
just like it. It didn't even matter if it was out of the blue and just like, okay, you're just gonna stop off there. That's fine and normal.
Yeah, but it was great.
And have
Loved it.
pizza.
No,
but it was perfect. And
can
it
we
was
talk-
just like this happy little TNG moment that filled up my heart and just like,
And
oh,
the doctor with Picard, like the fan service of that moment, like
yeah.
like of him being originally there in TNG, like any of those moments that were, for all of the faults that this series had, that the Picard first season had, when it addressed fan service, it addressed it in such a grounded, awesome way.
Yeah.
It didn't make it hokey. It didn't make it like throw away and vapid. It was so lovely.
Yeah.
It was lovingly done, and in a lot of ways expertly done. And one of the ways that it was, in my opinion, is also how we got to the moment where Picard goes to Penthe to meet up with Riker and Troy. He's in this desperate straits, and now there's this transwarp, I forget what it's called, in the Borg cube that can transport them anywhere.
Projector.
Yeah, transspatial projector, is that what it was?
Spatial trajectory. It's actually from an episode of Voyager. They
Right, I
referenced-
do remember that. Yeah.
Yeah.
But he, where does he go? To my family.
Yep.
To Riker and Troy. It's like that's where he runs for a safe haven. Like
Yeah.
he doesn't, and it's instant. It's like, where are we going? Here, because he
Yeah.
knows he can be safe there. It's beautiful. It's beautiful.
Also, Jerry Ryan is freaking amazing.
She is a Borg.
She is. She has not aged a day. She looks
Oh my God, so
She
true.
kicks all the ass. Like she's awesome. And yeah. And I like whatever his name is that plays Elnor. I think
Like
he's-
Yeah, we didn't even talk about
Like,
Elnor at all.
We
in this.
didn't. I had several moments where I wanted to bring it up, but we were in such good conversation. that,
Yeah.
like,
Again,
Yeah.
that's another example of another great element that could have deserved half a dozen episodes all
and
by
a
itself.
one-note element, right? Like he had a defining, like really heavy-handed characteristic, just like all of the new introductions to this.
right.
The
And-
dude is in space and he fights with a sword, and it's not a laser sword, and he still wins.
Sword.
Yeah.
An actual sword. Like, come on, guys. Like,
Yeah.
what? We're not going to explain that. We're not going to explore that.
It's
We're just
space
No,
like
just absolute candor, Ryan.
yeah.
my absolute candor is I fucking wanted more. That's my absolute candor.
I will definitely agree with you guys on the fan service. One thing that struck me in the rewatch is that it refrained from doing that thing that a lot of bad fan service does, where it stops the story or the action or the plot or whatever it is in that moment and sort of makes you look at it and go, we're referencing this thing that you already like. It's Boba Fett. It's whatever. Like, and
Yeah.
It's almost like
I definitely
resentful
had a
of
lot
it.
of fan
It's
service.
like
but it
here
never,
you go.
it never
like-
dragged you by the collar to look at it, right?
Yeah.
It was there, but they really restrained themselves from grinding everything else to a halt to look at it.
Can we?
Yeah.
And we don't have any time because it's already an hour and 22 minutes into this conversation. But like they planted the seed. I called it I didn't say it out loud, but in my brain I had called it. I promise you I did. That Riker was going to show up at the 11th hour and save the day because of that throwaway line he said in Penthe where he's like, well, I'm still in active service, but active reserve and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And how awesome would it have been, if we're talking hypotheticals, if clearly the Federation now has said F you to the Romulans and we're just using cloaking technology when we want to because of Deep Space Nine. The Defiant has a cloaking technology.
Oh yeah.
If Riker had just, from that moment, from the second Picard left Penthe,
Had been following.
had said, I'm coming back, and had followed him in the most badass, most powerful, most whatever line he said at the end of the climax in the standoff with the Romulans, but it had been one badass Federation ship against one or two Romulan warbirds, and at the 11th hour it just decloaks, and then Riker comes on.
Yeah.
Like how amazing would that have been? I would have lost my mind.
And that would have been an amazing reference and callback to that moment in, I think it's in the Klingon Civil War arc, where there's like this really brief throwaway line at the beginning where
Yeah,
Picard
with
is
Worf.
like, get me Mr. Worf, get me somebody, get me Gowron online, or blah blah blah, blah.
Somebody down waiting.
And that's it. And then the whole rest of the episode happens, and the Enterprise is up against like 3 warbirds or whatever, and like
It also wouldn't even be a direct callback, but would
his
really
fingers,
be...
and the birds are like, and you're like, oh right, that fucking, he said the thing.
He said that.
Yeah.
Also, the fact that Riker was a part of the illegal cloaking research on the Pegasus and everything like that. Like, it would have been a really fun all-around connection to his past and all of the different references. So
Yeah.
That's okay. We can write a better show.
I mean, it really comes down to, I think a lot of us is like, again, I don't think we were as negative. I didn't listen to the Discovery one yet, but I don't think we were as negative as I thought we would be going into this, to be honest. And it feels a lot like all 5 of us went into this of like, there were enough good things to leave us slightly frustrated of like, God, I wish they'd had 20 episodes to really explore and just do the show the way it could have been done if it had more room.
Yeah, I feel like our big takeaway from this conversation is how much potential was there and just not really like fully explored. But like that in itself is good, and it's certainly a lot better than some other aspects of science fiction franchises these days. So you know,
we were way less fussy about Discovery. Like way.
All right. So
frustrated, less fussy, less like they need to fix this and this and this and that. Like Picard, we're like,
well, you know, I want to. My final thoughts are going to be something that Juliet said to me after watching Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull.
Wow.
It's not going to be that bad, I promise. But she said something that was really that summed up perfectly, I think, what a lot of us, meaning a lot of me, were feeling, which was, Juliet said, you know, I saw it, and you know what it was like? It was like seeing a friend you hadn't seen in about 2 decades, and you were really close at one point, but now you're not sure you'd actually hang out with them anymore if you met them today. Like that was her experience, and it was perfect for Crystal Skull. I'm not saying I feel that way about Picard, because there's more to Picard that they absolutely got right, that hit me right in the feels, that is, to Keeley's point many times about the proper way to do fan service, that they did so well. There's so much potential there. They just don't have enough fucking time to do it in 10 episodes. You can't cover this kind of show and produce the kind of or live up to the legend.
You can. It's just that you have to edit more carefully. You have to
cut out a bunch of that side stuff.
Right. They just needed to prioritize which parts of the story they wanted to tell.
Correct. So you have to do that in the writer's room.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Right. Okay. Yeah, we're saying the same thing.
I'm saying you can make a great show.
Smaller palette or a bigger canvas.
Right.
100%.
One or the other.
That's a very good way of putting it, and I don't give you credit for anything.
And I think that's the perfect moment to wrap it up. Thanks, guys, for joining us. Thank you to Keeley and Travis for joining us, and to Ryan and Tara for joining us as well once the kiddos were down. We will be starting up our story missions again here pretty soon. I think we have one more supplemental episode between now and then. Is that right? I believe.
Sure.
Okay.
We don't know.
Sure.
We'll figure it out.
And then we'll be starting up story missions again. So look forward to that, guys. Thank you very much. Make sure to check us out on social media and follow Twitter, Twitch, Facebook, Instagram, and all the rest. And until next time, we will see you out there.
We'll see you out there.
See you out there.